The pace of vaccinations is speeding up across the country, as too are decisions by various governors to ease some of the restrictions that have been in place in their states. One of those is the state of Connecticut, and the governor, Ned Lamont, is joining us now. You guys are preparing to allow 100% capacity in restaurants, still with other rules in place like social distancing. At the same time, you guys have now a vaccination rate in your state of just under 10%, about 9.9%. So how are you balancing this sort of reopening as the vaccinations is still only about 10% of your population?
I turned that around a little bit, Julie. By March 19th, when we open up at 100% with the masks, we'll have the overwhelming majority of our people over the age of 55 vaccinated. And it's people over the age of 55 where you have the most complications, the most hospitalizations, and virtually 99% of the fatalities. So we think we can continue to reopen safely. And 100% is a little easier to enforce than, say, we're going to have a 3-week pause or open at 50% or 78%. People understand it's open, but you can be only open until 11 o'clock at night, and you got to wear the mask.
And Governor, just to sort of clarify what we mean here when we say 100% in a restaurant. In a restaurant, I think we can all understand, is a higher risk activity indoors. You got to take off the mask to eat, right? So at some point, you're not going to have that mask on. So if it's 100% capacity, but still with social distancing, is it really 100% capacity? Because you can't fit as many people in a restaurant if you're enforcing social distancing, right?
Yeah, Julie, you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of our smaller restaurants, they have to keep the 6 foot of distancing, or they have the plexiglass up. So they're still going to only be at 75%. A lot of our bigger ones were saying, let's go, we can do it. And by the way, we're not Florida. It's not like everybody's going to rush in on March 19th. On the contrary, people are cautiously going back to looking in. They're seeing this is a restaurant that seems to be taking the health protocols seriously. I think I'll come back. And finally, I'm hoping we're going to be outside. Our main streets are open for dining. And as you move into late March and April, it's going to be pretty nice out there to eat.
Governor, when do you anticipate lifting the mask mandate?
I think that's going to take a little bit longer. Masks definitely work. They give consumers a lot of confidence when it comes to getting back into the movie theaters, as I heard before. And it certainly gives schools more confidence. Our schools have been open. They all opened in September, pretty much everybody. But we still, in our cities, only have maybe half the kids feeling confident going back. So I think masks in the classroom will continue a little bit longer as young people, students, build up confidence in their kids to get back into the classroom.
Governor Lamont, it's Myles here, and as a graduate of UConn, I'm obviously quite invested in sort of the state of education in the state, and so I wanted to ask more about the schools. And you mentioned they've been open, but are you hopeful that the 2021-22 school year, both at the the primary, the secondary, and then of course the higher education levels, are you confident that they'll be able to look pretty much like a 1920 school year was on track for, given kind of how that has progressed in your state?
Yeah, Myles, I am pretty confident there. Everybody will be vaccinated. Maybe some people have a booster shot if the variant comes along. I think we're putting a lot of money into our schools to make them safer, starting with the ventilation systems. But I'm really less worried about September, more worried about July and making sure that we get these kids socializing back together, camps, learning, fun learning, socialized learning, so that when they get back into that classroom in September, they're ready to learn.
I also want to ask you about migration, Governor, because we've talked a lot about that on the show. People moving from urban areas. You mentioned Florida. There's big influx seemingly of people to Miami, places like Austin as well. How's that affecting Connecticut? Are you guys getting an influx of suburban residents, and is that going to be good for your tax revenue in the state?
Yeah, Julie, we've had about 50,000 folks move into the state of Connecticut over the last year. Most of them from New York City. And I cheer on New York City because we're part of that New York ecosystem. But a lot of young families are moving out here, which is a good thing. I think it's a lifestyle. Our schools are open. A little bit of a backyard, if you can afford that, is kind of nice. This may not be our last pandemic. So I think people taking a second look at the Connecticut lifestyle.
Governor, we've talked to you throughout the pandemic pretty consistently. And to your point, really, we could see more pandemics in the future. What have you learned the past year of the pandemic, and have you begun to prepare for that next one?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question. We've learned that you got to have a stockpile. There was no stockpile of PPE going back a year ago, and we were scrambling. Connecticut's got a stockpile, and I think Washington now has a stockpile. Number two, you can't do this alone. I mean, obviously, federal leadership is a big help. We have that leadership now. And as you know, I worked very closely with my regional governors, starting with Governor Cuomo, as we tried to put a consistent message out to people about why we had these rules and what they mean for you.
Governor Lamont, it's always great to see you. Governor Ned Lamont joining us from Connecticut. All the best to you, Governor.
Thanks, Julie.